Good morning. Morning. Hello. What a great crowd we have, and thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Teresa Rose Crook, and I am the Executive Director of Communities Foundation of Oklahoma. That's my paying gig. One of my volunteer gigs is I am the Vice Chair of Education for the Oklahoma City Chamber. And I love getting to do this work. I've been a passionate advocate for Oklahoma City Public Schools and for public education throughout our state for pretty much my entire career. Again, thank you all so much for being here today at the Chamber Forum, where we are going to hear some exciting news and an update on the implementation of the Pathway to Greatness project taking place here in Oklahoma City Public Schools. But before we hear more about that, we do always need to thank those individuals and companies that make this luncheon possible. I would first like to recognize our presenting sponsor, Cox Communications. So please help me in welcoming Glenda Montel, Enterprise Sales Manager for Cox. Come on out, Glenda.
Hello and welcome on behalf of Cox Business. As she said, I'm Glenda Montiel, the Enterprise Sales Manager here in Oklahoma City. And we thank you so much for joining us today. We're anxious to hear from Dr. McDaniel on the progress on Pathways to Greatness. As Cox has been a business partner, we've got to see just a glimpse of those exciting changes that's happening. And to all of our educators in the audience today, this is a reminder that our Cox Charities Innovation and Education Grants are open now, and deadline is quickly approaching. March 1st is our deadline, so only 9 days left. To those not familiar with Innovation and Education Grants, they support technology, programs, and curriculum that promote students' academic success and enhance the educational experience. So once again, we look forward to giving away another $100,000 to promote our students and community in 2020. Thank you.
Glenda, thank you so much, and thank you to Cox for not only our luncheon today, but also for those innovation grants. And I think we've got a couple of other people from Cox here. So Randy, anybody else here from Cox? Oh, great, thank you. All right, thank you for your great work, and thank you for being here. I'd also like to recognize our corporate sponsor, ADG, and who's here from ADG today? This table right here, great. So we've got our bookend sponsors right here. Thank you so much for sponsoring this lunch and the work that AGD does in our community. Now, some of you in the audience, those that are passionate about public education and particularly Oklahoma City Public Schools, may remember that it was almost exactly 1 year ago today that Oklahoma City Superintendent Dr. Sean McDaniel, that's your name, was our guest speaker at this event. We see each other about 3 times a week, that's why that's kind of funny, was our guest speaker, where he introduced us to the Pathway to Greatness Plan, or P2G as it's come to be called. And this was the district's ambitious effort to realign the resources of the district with the needs of our students. And it came with more than a year of planning. I mean, it was a tremendous effort, listening to the community, analyzing data, learning key selling points of what was going to work, really addressing the goals and needs of the community to better serve our students. So some of the real important pieces of the plan was about providing significant, what we call trade-ups, that would allow the district to better provide world-class education to every single student. So what is it that students really need, and how do we realign our resources to be able to provide that? Those trade-ups included making sure that every elementary student had access to art classes, installing STEM centers throughout the district, adding counselors so that every school had a counselor on staff, and repurposing many vacant school buildings into vibrant community centers or providing services to people that, other than just our school students, but services throughout our community. After many hours of feedback, the Oklahoma City School Board unanimously voted to move forward with Pathway to Greatness in March of 2019. And the district has diligently been working on implementing that plan since then. But I do want to stop and pause and ask if there are Oklahoma City Public School Board members in the room, and to say thank you to them. Please stand if you're in the room. Carrie, anybody else? The diligence and the courage that the board utilized to be able to take advantage of this opportunity was really tremendous, and it really was something that the district and school boards previously have struggled to be able to do. So I say with the greatest appreciation to Carrie, and if you will pass on to your fellow board members, thank you so much for being willing to take that brave step and improve education for our children. So today, Dr. McDaniel is back to give us a progress report on the P2G implementation. Now, we will have time for audience questions, so think about them during his presentation. Write them down if you need to. There's nothing more awkward than you get to the end, ask for questions, and nobody has any. But before we do hear from him, please enjoy your lunch, and we will be back and convene shortly. Thank you. So please go ahead and continue enjoying your lunch if you haven't finished yet, and especially that fabulous carrot cake. I understand that they will be bringing coffee around to make that cake even better. But while you're doing so, please help me welcome Dr. McDaniel to the stage. His complete biography is in the back of the program, but he is going to give us an exciting update on P2G. Dr. McDaniel.
Okay, thank you. You good? Good. Everybody hear me just fine? Good. Ben? Ben, can you hear me, Ben? Ben, perfect. I'm not a sound guy, so somebody make that stop. So about 2 years ago, I was sitting in an interview with the Board of Education, and they said, I'm really serious about this position. I loved what I saw. I was really thinking hard about, if offered the position, would I accept the position? And so one of the first things out of their mouths was, now this may mean that we have to close some schools. And this may mean that we have to redraw boundary lines so that thousands of kids and families are affected. And this may also mean that of our 5,000 employees, maybe as many as 60% of them have to begin work at another place every morning. And so I said, hey, sign me up. Right, Carrie? And so we quickly jumped into this pathway to greatness with the understanding, and I cannot even begin to tell you how much I appreciate a board that says, we know that stuff will come to us. And most of this stuff is not going to be positive when we jump into this radical change. I respect them greatly for saying many things, one of which is the status quo is not acceptable anymore. We can't continue to talk about all the things we'd like to change and then never do it. So this board, close your ears, Carrie. This board, my first few months, had a difficult time having a unanimous vote to adjourn a meeting. Some of you have heard me say that before. So to think that they would unanimously get behind this reinvention with the radical change included in the pathway is incredible. It's historic, and I give them kudos for doing that. So Carrie, thank you for your forward thinking, and I will certainly extend that to our board as well. So that set us down the path. With every plan, there has to be what's next. So we talked about the plan a year ago. I went on the road and talked to well over 10,000 people in a series of meetings where we talked about the plan. The next steps are the critical piece. It can't be about the plan. Everybody has a great plan. So what I'm going to do today is talk a little bit about our early results. Now you know that this is not a flip of the switch with the world. We know that this is a progressive plan, an execution of a plan. But I think it's good to pause and celebrate when we're able to. So what I want to show you today are some things that we're celebrating about. Now before I jump into this, I want to just give my disclaimer early on. While we are going to spend a little bit of time reporting out some really good things, some cool things that are happening in the district, please do not mistake today for a victory lap of any kind. We have enormous work to do. We have a list, and you'll see some of it in the presentation. We've got things to do that can dramatically impact kids and teachers and families still ahead of us. And so even though we can say we're seeing some progress, not a victory lap today, but important to celebrate. Okay, so let's jump in here. All right. This is a one-pager that we bring to mind as a staff as we're talking about P2G, and it incorporates hundreds of pages of documents. And what we like to do is, in fact, I'm going to back up one. What we like to do is bring these things to our attention frequently. The reason we do what we do, the reason we set down the P2G pathway is because of this right here. Because we believe that there are kids in our school district who are not getting a chance. We believe that it mattered in our school district where you lived in the city as to whether or not you got resources or great teachers or great school leaders. And that's where the board said unacceptable. And we're not just going to talk about it. We're going to think about these faces, these families, and when we make decisions, we're going to ask the question, how does this impact these kids? Likewise, when we look at, a strategic plan, ours is this thick. When we look at the multiple documents that we have, it's comprehensive, it's cumbersome. So we wanted to create something, a one-pager that would remind us that we can't work in a vacuum, we can't work in isolation. Everything we do needs to connect to something we believe in. So on the right-hand side, you see our Big Five for 2020. 5 significant initiatives that at a district level we're engaged in right now. If you look to the left, you see our mantra, ignite passion, instill pride. And then in the circle around, you see our core values. We believe in these things. If we're not getting beyond just listing them, if we're not living these things out, we're missing it. If we can't connect what we do to these things and exhibit these things in how we work, we're missing it. And then in the 4 corners, you see the 4 pillars of our strategic plan. So a one-pager that kind of tells the story about our work. So Pathway to Greatness, let's just jump in. When I went on the road and talked to thousands of people, and that's just the big meetings. We've had, I don't even know the number, dozens of meetings, small group, living rooms, HOAs, you name it, we've gone. If 2 or more said, come talk to us, we went. And so what we did in every single instance was we made a bunch of commitments. Some would call them promises. You promised us that if we went on this journey with you that included closing schools, disrupting people, making people anxious, that we were going to get something in return. This wasn't just, let's hope this works. And so what I want to do is talk about the things we committed to. Well, okay. So we call these things trade-ups. And the trade-up is simply that return on the investment. You're going to invest in us as a community, as a group of teachers, as kids and parents. You're going to, now, I know you don't like it, and there's still a lot of anxiety and a lot of unrest across our district because of P2G. But we're going to return some things to you, specifically to our kids. So just to get the layout, you can see this pretty easily. You have a before P2G and a current. So let's look at that far left one, full-time art, music, and PE. I've told many people, as a kid growing up in Denver, I thought everybody had PE, art, and music. My entire life, I never knew anything different. We went once a week at least to PE, to art, and to music. So last year in our district, only 33%, you know this story, of our schools had those things. We know, and I don't think I need to argue this with anybody, but we know that when you introduce students early and often to art and to music, it affects every other area of their lives. There's evidence to support it. Yet when budget troubles hit us, not just Oklahoma City, but public schools, what are the first things that go? Music, art, counselors, the things that we know have the greatest impact on our kids as far as a holistic delivery. So what we're really proud of, here's your first report out. We promised people that every school would have at least one full-time counselor, one full-time art, one full-time music, and one full-time PE. Every single elementary in our district, as we sit here today, has all of those things, minimally. And then as our schools grow, we take two schools, we combine them, the population increases, we give more support in those areas to those schools. Okay, so check. Now remember that this is kid-based. I'm not giving you this so that we can check boxes. You know, we don't want to check boxes. We want to make sure that our kids' lives are enhanced because of P2G. If you keep moving to the right, full-time school librarian. Of our 33 elementary schools, there are 2 schools that share one librarian, and it's because of their population. Okay, so what we're going to do as we move forward is ensure that 93% becomes 100% as a minimum standard. Okay, if you keep moving to the right, assistant principal. We have veteran principals who have been in the district, have been doing their work for 20 years, and until this year have never had an assistant principal. Now, how does that tie to a student? Because remember, what we want to do is enhance the lives of our kids. How does an assistant principal, and I think there's some common thought to this, but an assistant principal many times is that confidant, takes up slack where a principal is doing everything and has a hard time engaging with families, for example. Now the principal can engage at higher levels with families, check on kids, because the assistant principal is taking some of the duties and responsibilities that took up all the time of the principal. So an assistant principal is key to the life of a student. And then dedicated STEM makerspaces. So I think we all know what that is and what that means, and we all are very well aware in this room of what our future looks like. Our future tells us that no matter whether a student moves on to college, university, trade school, job right after high school, military, that student better have a minimum skill set when it comes to STEM, or they're going to flounder. We know that. Those jobs are coming. Jobs are waiting on our kids that if they have this minimum set of skills, STEM skills, they're going to have all kinds of opportunities. Last year, 4% of our elementaries, 4% of our elementaries, that's like 2 schools, had a dedicated makerspace where kids could go and do hands-on learning, project-based learning, collaborate with one another, learn about the world of STEM. I'm going to spend a little time on this. Right now, every single elementary, all 33, have dedicated maker spaces or STEM spaces. We have kids as young as, and I was in a classroom at Coolidge Elementary last week, where kids as young as 7 years of age are coding. They're writing code and programming these little bot balls and doing incredible things with 3D printers and learning through games and through fun stuff these skill sets that we need them to have. So here's a number for you. I'm sitting down with the principal there, and She tells me that by the end of the year, at one elementary with 634 kids, that they will have been exposed to 1 million minutes of STEM hands-on activity as a school. You know what their number was a year ago? Nil. 0. In 1 year, one of our 33 schools will have 1 million minutes of exposure for their kids in the area of STEM. So you remember when you had kids, if you had kids, or when you were little, my mom and dad threw everything in the world under the sun at me, hoping that something would stick, right? I played volleyball, I played soccer, I tried to play the piano. Peter, where are you? I tried to play the piano. And hoping that something would stick. STEM is no different, but it has to be done early, routinely, often, so that as kids are exposed to STEM, the lights will come on, they'll love it, and then as they become middle school kids, they'll choose STEM electives. As they move into high school, they'll do projects that have everything to do with STEM, and they may even seek out jobs, university life, trade school, etc., with a STEM emphasis. Most of the business leaders in our city that I talk to are pretty interested about pipeline and keeping kids in state. This is that. This is our kickoff to that. So we're really excited about that. A little bit more about this. So this is a list. When we threw this out there, and I don't mean to embarrass anybody here, but our Oklahoma City Public Schools Foundation, Mary Malone and her staff and her board, they took this and said, kind of to me, you can either get on board or get out of my way, because we're doing this. This was so important to our foundation, and clearly was important to our community, because every name you see said we will adopt a school to the tune of about $30,000 per school. So in a few short weeks, maybe a few months, we raised $1 million so that every student in our school district, in the elementary schools, could have a STEM experience. And so this is the power of partnership. This is the power of community. You may not recognize this. Yeah, that's good. Was it in this very room that where Cal came? So you may not recognize this guy, right? Iron Man, Cal Ripken Jr. He was doing some work through Fields and Futures for us. You know, building fields, and fantastic partnership going on through the McLaughlins and Fields and Futures. And we didn't even know he had anything to do with STEM. Turns out, Cal Ripken Senior Foundation, they have STEM schools across the country, but they've never had a STEM district. And so he said, you guys are doing what? You're trying to put a STEM space in every school? We're in. And so we now have the the Cal Ripken Senior Foundation, who is also a partner with Oklahoma City Public Schools, because he said, this is life-changing stuff. And so we have this wonderful partnership that has evolved specifically to enhance the lives of kids. And you're going to hear me say that a lot. So let's talk about counselors. You're familiar with adverse childhood experiences, the ACEs, that everybody seems to be talking about right now. You know, that experience that a child has prior to him or her turning 18 years of age, that it may be a witness to or a victim of violence or abuse of some sort. It may be a situation in the home, a divorce. It may be, I don't know where my next meal is coming from. These experiences that kids have, Oklahoma leads the nation in children and their average ACE score. Okay, we're the largest school district in the state, and so you probably understand where I'm going with that. We have lots and lots of kids who have lots and lots of challenges. So, Embrace OKC is that concept that we all need to agree that until we can respond to the challenges that our kids come to school with, our expectation that they knock the top out of a state test is probably misplaced. Do we need to do well on state tests? Absolutely we do. Do we need academic performance and achievement to increase in our district? Absolutely we do. But if we think we're going to go out and buy the latest, greatest curriculum package or without addressing the mental health of our kids, we are mistaken. So Embrace OKC says partnership, we're going to step up to the plate as a community, and we're going to help you resolve these issues that your kids come to school with. So it's agency support, it's United Way, it's the Chamber of Commerce, it's the foundation, it's the City of Oklahoma City, this thing that we call the Compact. And so part of what we said as a district is we've got to step up as a district. We can't expect everybody else to come and heal us. We need to heal ourselves a little bit. So what we said is we're hiring more counselors, more social workers, more nurses, because those people collectively, along with our partners, we can help make some inroads. We can help resolve some of the issues that our kids and families have as we pursue academic success. So last year, 24% had at least one full-time counselor. If you've heard me talk, you've heard the not-so-funny joke that if you were at an elementary school as a kid, please don't have any problems until Friday because that's when your counselor will be here. Okay? Today, every elementary has at least one full-time counselor every single day in school. That is a step. It is not the final answer, but it is a step. So you see what's happening here. You layer supports of different kinds around our kids, and you can have an expectation that they're going to achieve. It's not a hope. It is evidence-based. It is research, just mountains of research. If you will do these things, then these things will happen. So that's what Pathway to Greatness has done for us. We are layering supports around kids. Counselors, nurses, social workers, art teachers, music teachers, the life experience in school for a student today, particularly elementary age kids, is different than it's been in a long time. And we're pleased with that. Again, not waving the banner, we're not victory lapping, but we are pleased. Here's something that you told us was one of your worst fears. You tell me you're going to close 15 schools. We've seen the district close schools before. And if you drive around today, you still see schools that have fences and boards and copper thieves and big chain locks on the front doors. Please do not do that to us again, is what you told us. And so our report out is of the 15 we closed, 14 are either sold, partly occupied, or fully occupied. Now, I want to qualify this because there are some where we've come to terms on contracts, but they're doing build-outs inside the building. So there's construction going on. They're not full service yet. And this is good timing. I had a conversation today about a couple of our schools that they no longer belong to us, or we've leased them. And so somebody else has taken over, and they're in disrepair right now. So when you drive by, it looks like kind of what we saw happen in the past, because we need to get out there and mow, we need to take care of the building. So I'm glad I heard that today. But I think the long-term answer, maybe not long-term, short-term answer next year is we're going to have 15 out of 15 that are occupied, which alleviates some of that fear of devaluing property, devaluing neighborhood. We don't want a boarded up school in our neighborhood. We're going to have life inside the school, okay? So we're happy to report out on that. And here's what it looks like. So if you want to know who's in what building, we have this divided up into 3 sections, and you can see that some of it's tenant leasing, it's charter partners, it's Oklahoma City County Health, it's Rainbow Fleet, it's Sunbeam, and then you have some that we're continuing to use in part as administrative services. And then you have another one, if you saw the media splash on that a few weeks ago, Green Pastures out in the Spencer area was sold to television and film industry. They're going to bring in jobs. It's going to be a boom to the economy in time. As many as 300 jobs on that campus over the next few years. And so, credit where credit is due. We had a lot of great partners who you see on this list who went through some won't call it any names, but some pretty tough negotiations and some time lapse. We had a team inside the district who devoted 80% of their time to getting this done because we knew this was important to all of us. Here's the neat thing, another neat thing. One of the reasons we set out down the pathway to greatness we talked about is we wanted better stuff for our kids. We wanted better opportunities. We wanted access to our kids. We thought everybody deserved a fair shot. But we also said that we're not being good stewards of the taxpayer dollar. And so in year one, this year, we will capture about $4 million because we closed 15 schools and repurposed them. As we move into year 2 and 3 and 4, that will increase because in year 1, we provided some assistance as you know, our partners were moving from one place into another. We helped them financially. We waived some of the cost for utilities, for example, for a month or 2 months, et cetera, so that we could help people transition. In year 2, 3, 4, and so on, we expect that $4 million to turn into $4.5 to turn into about $5 million that we can then leverage right back into the classroom. That's where we get art teachers. That's where we get more counselors. That's where we can do additional support ideas for our kids. So here's the short list, and this is short. Just know that for every one of these, there are probably 5 others. These are the challenges. These are things we've got to work on. We've got to correct. We've got to do better. And then behind every one of these, we have a full-blown tactical strategic plan. Okay, so we have who's the champion, what's the staff look like, what are the resources needed, what's this going to cost us in the end, and what's our timeline for every one of these. Now you may look at this and believe me when I tell you that every problem we've had since March 8th when the board said yes to this plan, every problem has been attributed to Pathway to Greatness. If you look up on this list, do you think that, let me just use our friends from Moore. Moore doesn't have a Pathway to Greatness. Do you think they have transportation problems? Do you think they have class size problems and staffing problems? They have all these. Whether there ever was a P2G or not, we're going to have challenges. So I want to be clear about that not everything that happens that's not good is because of P2G. But we will take responsibility for other things where we didn't anticipate well enough. Taft Middle School. We had a number, we felt confident in the number, and as kids started pouring in, we saw transfers coming from other middle school zones. We saw kids coming from charters and private schools into Taft, and so we missed the number. So we had to take the 5th grade out of Taft and create a 5th grade center just down the street from Taft at Old Linwood Elementary. Okay, so what we've said is this is not 100% science. It's based in science, it's based in evidence. We're going to make calculated guesses, if you will, but when we're wrong, we've got to be nimble. We've got to immediately identify where we went wrong, what's the solution, and get it into place. So that's been happening. So you can look at this and you can probably see that it's not an exhaustive list. A lot of other things that we're continuing to work on, but our commitment is we're going to work on it. So I want to play this for you. This is just a few minutes, and what we always would come back to as we're looking at demographics and as we're talking about the strategy of P2G, we kept coming back to we've got to hear from the people that this is impacting. We've got to hear, we can sit in a room all day long and talk about all the great things that are happening with P2G. What are moms and dads saying? What are kids saying? What are teachers saying? What's the community saying? And so this is just a snippet. This is kind of like, I'm looking across the group. Y'all remember Dr. J, right? Julius Irving? Michael Jordan. This is like our highlight. This is our Michael Jordan highlight reel. Please understand that we know that this is not telling the full, complete story. Michael Jordan, believe it or not, this may disappoint some of you, he actually did turn the ball over once in a game, okay? So we're not showing all of the warts and all the challenges in this video, but we thought it was important to hear directly from people that we believed were being impacted through P2G. So let's watch this. I think I just have to punch that. As Oklahoma City Public Schools goes, so goes the rest of the state, so goes the city. We know that Oklahoma City in particular has been experiencing a tremendous renaissance, and we want to take our place in that renaissance.
One of the things we knew with Pathway to Greatness was that every single person in our community would be new to something, whether it was a new building, new programming, new faces, new staff.
One of the trade-ups I think is very important was having a full-time library media specialist at most of our schools. And I'm so happy that I'm one of them. So we never have to close the library for any reason.
It's called the STEM Lab, and we get to use robots and technology.
We were able to convert our room to a STEM lab, and the opportunity that it's bringing our kids is that they're going to be ready when they graduate high school to take jobs on that are related to technology.
Music education and music in general is something that globally we have found is a language that goes beyond all barriers. And so being able to have it in every school, in the elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools, to help these students be able to not just create music but understand it and then be able to communicate through music is a huge benefit. And it'll take a lot of students very far in life.
I think all students should have access to music class because it helps them learn more things as they go on in life.
It's hard to imagine a fourth grader that's 9 or 10 years old that has never had a formal art class. And with the P2G movement, we have that opportunity for students to experience. It's an exciting time for elementary students.
A majority of our nurses are extremely happy with the transition of minimizing the amount of schools we had on our schedule. We were just going place to place, kind of treading water at times, not allowing to create relationships with the staff and students. And now that I'm full-time at one school, I'm able to collaborate more effectively with my peers and my colleagues to manage in-school care more effectively.
Right after school ended last year, our son was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and it was scary. But a week before school started, we met with the principal, Ms. Bresman, and Nurse Kay, and immediately I just felt so much better because I knew she was going to be here full time and we wouldn't have had that a year ago.
As a counselor, my main job is to take care of kids. Their social, their emotional learning. Also, we're at the front line of being a trusted adult because again, not every student has an adult that they trust and feel comfortable to talk to at home. Having a counselor in a building all day, it allows for the counselors to build relationships. It also allows for us to be proactive rather than reactive.
As a teacher with the P2G changes and we're able to collaborate with other second grade teachers whenever we're doing our lesson plans, it's not just me making the entire lesson plan and finding lessons that are engaging and the kids will get excited about.
Thanks to P2G, our students are getting a wider variety of resources. We have more students in AP courses. We have students that are enrolled in concurrent enrollment, getting to earn college credits for free here at the high school level. So they are able to take advantage of more things thanks to P2G.
With Pathway to Greatness, we have less overcrowding in our school. We now have more available time in our classroom, time to eat, and more available classrooms to expand future projects.
The changes that I've seen from last year coming into this year are there are more students in the hallways for sure. The atmosphere of the school is different. We're geared more towards learning.
Yo pienso que es muy importante que uno de padre tenga mucha confianza en los maestros en las escuelas. Sí están aquí para cuidar a sus hijos. Ellos le van a tratar de enseñar ser el bien para que los maestros los directen en el camino correcto que deberían de seguir.
As a teammate, you learn a lot of valuable lessons that hopefully build a foundation in your life that you're going to face victories and you're going to face defeats. As a teammate, you learn how to work through those obstacles.
My favorite class is PE. I like to do the exercises because I get to get my energy out and it's really fun.
It just makes you proud that we're really lucky that we live in such an amazing city, that people are willing to come together and accomplish a goal together. I'm really proud of what this city has done over the last couple decades, but we've got to meet some of the needs that are not getting met and give some extra guidance to some of these communities that need that so they have a chance of propelling our city forward.
There is absolutely no way we could have continued down this journey or maybe even begun the journey without our unbelievable community partners, businesses, individuals who live in our community and some even outside of our community who said, we believe in what you're doing and we want to be a part of this journey.
Oklahoma City Public Schools is a significant player in Oklahoma City, and it was time for us to go through our own renaissance, and P2G was the beginning of that renaissance. It was only possible because of community involvement, district leadership, champions of principals and teachers and other staff at the site levels.
It aligns our resources to our current status, and it also provides equitable access for all of our kids to those opportunities that are so important to our students, our teachers, and our families. This is a marathon, it's not a sprint. We believe P2G is working. So from the onset, introducing all these new things, the trade-ups that we referred to the monitoring, how are things working, continuing to collect the input and then adjusting as necessary. We expect that as we go throughout this year along the pathway to greatness, that we're going to continue to hear good reports and that we're going to take care of kids. The ultimate goal from the onset is how can we make a difference through reinvention in the lives of our kids. Good. So I think that concludes my presentation. I want to just wrap up this way, and I think we're going to do a little Q&A. I said it here, and I say it everywhere I go. When we talk about these kids, we're not talking about Oklahoma City Public School kids. These are not my kids. These are not kids that belong to the Board of Education. These are our kids. And so the investment that you make is equally important, maybe more important in some cases, than the investment that we make as a school district. And I hope that makes sense. These kids, and this is cliche, but it's inside me, I believe this, these kids will someday take the positions that you hold now. And we want them to be ready. We don't want these kids settling for life. And unfortunately, in our demographic, in an urban school district, many times kids, because of obstacles that are not removed, because access that they don't have, they have to settle for life. We want them to be everything that they can be. And in order to do that, this takes everybody in this room and beyond. I am so grateful for the partnerships that exist. And I say this not because I'm greedy, I say this because I believe that we can always do a little more often, and in doing so, these kids will win. So we're looking forward to the next 6 months, the next year, the next 3 years, and I believe, as sure as I'm standing here, that we're going to change the narrative. We're going to move the dial, and these kids are going to perform academically much better than they are right now. And I'm talking district-wide because of the investments we're making on the front end. Thank you for letting me come and talk with you. And then I think, are we going to do one question? I'm just kidding. I'm messing with you.
Thank you, Dr. McDaniel, and I think that everybody would agree with me that we're very fortunate to have you working with our kids and working with our city.
We have a great team.
Yes, you do. You do have a fantastic team. So I hope you took notes of the questions that you have. So I've got a couple of chamber staff in the room, so if you've got a question, please raise your hand. I think we've got one right over here.
I have a question. You were talking elementary.
Yes,
so are you seeing the same types of support at the middle school and high school levels in all of these areas that you mentioned?
It's a great question. We have minimums at all of our secondary schools with regard to counselors, for example. What we're doing as we move into next year is we're going to pay more attention to secondary schools. This first phase was really focused on elementary, so we could get things in place and then move that through the system. So we have a lot of work to do generally, but secondary schools, one of the things we're going to do is lower the ratio for school counselors. Right now it's at about 500 kids to 1, which is crazy. So we're going to take a step and lower that closer to 400 to 1. That doesn't sound like a significant step, but it really is. It gets more support in our schools from a counseling standpoint. Class sizes with elementary schools, we actually, in our K through 4 district-wide, we actually have lower class sizes this year than we did a year ago. but I would call it flat. Now keep in mind, and I speak in averages. We have to with 33 elementary schools, meaning that we have some schools this year who are above the average, and they're above what they had last year. Likewise, we have schools that are below the average and have much smaller class sizes than they had last year. We speak in averages. When we look at secondary schools, our class sizes are, I would say, stable, but we have more hot spots. We have more classes, secondary, that have 30 plus kids in them. Okay, so overall, on average, we've increased a little bit, but when you talk about 30 kids plus in a classroom, that's too many, and we have more of those this year than last. It's a focus area. You saw it up on our list, and that's something we're addressing as we speak. Great question. Thank you.
Next question. Right over here. Okay, you guys over here, this side is whipping you.
Money obtained from schools being repurposed, would that go back into that particular feeder pattern, or does that go into a certain bucket and you all identify?
It's a great question. That goes, we realize money through just cost deference, so we're not paying bills anymore, but we're also, there's a rent in place, so we have a little bit of revenue coming in. That money goes into our general fund, which is our operating budget. And then based upon need, then it is redeployed out to schools that have what bubble to the top as greatest needs. Okay, so it's not feeder pattern. We close 4 schools, that money goes back into that feeder pattern. That's not how it works for us. We put it in the general fund and redeploy as the needs arise. Great question, Adrian.
Next question. Yep. Come on, guys.
Hey, we can meet later.
Okay, maybe that's what we should do.
I'm messing with you.
Actually, I wanted to know, as you move forward and anticipate the successes that are sure to come, charter schools, do you anticipate students moving from charter schools back into the public school system? And if so, how do you accommodate those additional numbers if that were to happen? And what do you have in place for that?
So I think history tells us, or gives us some response there. We know that over the years, kids have moved both ways. So they've moved from charter into traditional, from traditional into charter. We also have enterprise schools, we have application schools, and so, for me, the choice of going to a school rests with the family, and so we want to be able to accommodate whatever that choice is. We can identify, just through our data, where current kids went last year, and so we have numbers. Likewise, we have numbers of kids that we lost to one or another different choice option. What we believe right now is that we're in a position where we can take on additional kids. One quick example is at the beginning of the year, really over the summer, one of our charter schools closed. About 400 give or take kids, and we had to immediately take those kids into our system. So we are flexible enough that we can take on those kids. In this case, it was on a campus. If we had needed to, we could have taken those kids by neighborhood and put them into neighborhood schools. What that does, clearly, is it increases class size. So we talk about, and you'll hear lots more in the next few weeks about this, we talk about having not just a plan B, but having a plan C, D, and E, so that as we anticipate the what-ifs, as we anticipate these things that could happen, we can immediately deploy resources and put a plan in place. What you'll hear soon is about a bond initiative that we're going to run as a school district, probably sometime in 2020. And it's exactly for what you're talking about. We need to do a better job, my opinion, in providing opportunities for our kids. And so it's going to be a very unique bond. It's going to be for the purpose of giving kids access and providing opportunities for kids. So we just need to do a good job of logistical planning and making sure that whatever happens that we can anticipate, we can immediately go into go mode and let's respond to whatever the challenge is. Another good question.
I think we've got time for one more question. Yes. Yay! You held up your side of the room.
You were talking about the bond and you were talking about access and opportunity. Someone talked about how charter schools fit in that. My hope is that as you're developing the bond, that you will have a big series of meetings that provide opportunities for all families, families that are in traditional Oklahoma City public schools, families that are in charter schools, families that are in private schools, and families that have no kids in school at all, in order to be part of that conversation. Because I'm a big fan of the portfolio school concept. And my hope is that we're going to move towards that, to where neighborhoods and communities really have a say and a determining voice in what their schools really look like. Because when you get that, you get buy-in, and when you get buy-in, people are going to support those schools. And I think that conversation needs to be held, because there are different models and different types of schools that are necessary for Oklahoma City public schools to be successful. And I believe this bond issue can help pave the way for that to happen, but it's got to begin with a dialogue with all of us.
As always, Mr. Jones, I appreciate your input. Thank you. And thank you all.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Am I good?
You're good. You're good. Yes. Okay, get script. So thank you so much, Superintendent McDaniel. Again, I'd like to thank Cox Communication and ADG for sponsoring this lunch, and hope that you will join us next month as we hear from companies about why they chose to grow in Oklahoma City and what our community can do to better serve a vibrant business climate. Thank you so much for being here, and we will see you soon.